Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, we've got the latest on stories developing around the world. And we'll start with the headlines of this Tuesday.
Investigative officials are now on site collecting evidence as investigations are now underway.
Defying a nationwide curfew in Sri Lanka, several hundred protesters continue to chant slogans against the government one day after violent clashes saw the resignation of the Prime Minister. "96-year-old Queen Elizabeth misses the state opening of Parliament in the UK for the first time in nearly 60 years. Prince Charles deputises for her."
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, Her Majesty's government's priority, the continued success and integrity. Her Majesty's government will prioritize.
US President Joe Biden signs a bill to expedite weapons deliveries to Ukraine for use against Russian forces. And he calls on Congress to pass a bill immediately to provide even more weaponry before existing shipments are exhausted later this month. The Spanish government fires the country's spy chief, Paz Esteban, after revelations that the country's prime minister and Catalan separatist leaders had their mobile phones hacked. Tesla recalls about 130,000 vehicles in the US. This after a regulator flags an overheating issue that may cause the center touchscreen display in the car to malfunction. And a 52-year-old Nepali Sherpa scales Mount Everest for a record 26th time, beating his own previous record. US President Joe Biden has signed into law the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act. It's a mouthful, but the law makes it easier to export military equipment to Ukraine in a bid to help it resist Russia's military assault. Speaking in the Oval Office, the president said the bill provides another tool in his efforts to support Ukrainian democracy against Vladimir Putin's brutal war. It's only the second time in history a Lend-Lease law has been approved by a US president. Franklin Delano Roosevelt used the mechanism to defeat Hitler during World War II. The move allows the US to provide equipment to Ukraine now, bypassing red tape and creating a technical requirement to worry about payments at a later date.
I want to thank members of Congress here for getting this passed and everyone who supported the bill. And the bill demonstrates the support for Ukraine is pivotal at this moment. Every day Ukrainians pay with their lives and they fight along the atrocities that the Russians are engaging in are just beyond the pale. And the cost of the fight is not cheap, but caving to aggression is even more costly. That's why we're staying in this. And with Putin's war once more bringing wanton destruction into Europe and to reaffirm the enduring commitment to the future grounded in democracy, human rights, and peaceful resolution of disagreements, I'm now going to sign this bill. And again, I thank the colleagues who are standing behind me, and because it really matters. It matters.
It's reported here that on Monday, US congressional Democrats agreed on a proposal to provide nearly $40 billion in additional aid for Ukraine. President Biden has called on Congress to pass that Ukrainian aid bill immediately. He's warning that existing shipments will run out in approximately 10 days. The president initially proposed $33 billion to help Ukraine as it fights Russia, but Congress has added billions more for food aid and military equipment. Meanwhile, the US president is also fuming over alleged leaks about US intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians. Sources say President Biden told his top national security officials that the leaks are unhelpful and must stop.
Well, what I will tell you, without confirming private internal calls, that the president was displeased with the leaks. His view was that it was an overstatement of our role, an inaccurate statement, and also an understatement of the Ukrainians' role and their leadership, and he did not felt they were constructive.
Last week, after the White House denied providing direct intelligence to the Ukrainians that was intended to help them target Russian generals, Biden spoke separately to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, CIA Director William Burns, and Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence. Administration officials have previously claimed there are clear limits on the intelligence that the US shares with Ukraine, including a ban on providing precision targeting intelligence that would allow the Ukrainians to go after senior Russian leaders by name. Those limits are part of a White House effort to avoid crossing a line that Moscow may view as too escalatory. Now, the other big news here in the United States, an intense 11-day manhunt that riveted America has ended with the death of a corrections officer and the capture of the Alabama prison inmate she helped to escape. A police pursuit ended in a dramatic crash in Indiana. The officer fatally shot herself and the inmate surrendered. Vicky White had been on the run with inmate Casey White, a murder suspect. The two were not related. On April the 29th, they left the Lauderdale County Jail in Florence, Alabama, for a routine courthouse appointment that was later revealed to have been fabricated. Authorities realized the two had gone missing after Officer White's patrol car was found abandoned in a shopping center parking lot. An arrest warrant was issued for Vicky White on a charge of permitting or facilitating an escape. Yesterday's crash occurred in Evansville, Indiana, more than 300 kilometers from the jail. The police there had received information that the Whites were in a vehicle that the officers began to pursue. A U.S. Marshal's vehicle collided with the car that the Whites were traveling in, causing it to roll over and crash.
A member of the Evansville Police Department observed the vehicle and thought that it could have matched the description of the vehicle that we've been looking for, and that's what we went to investigate.
Well, the lesson that I think I've learned, and I think everybody's learned, you don't know who you can trust. You know, I had every bit of trust in Vicky White. She has been an exemplary employee. And what in the world provoked her, prompted her to pull a stunt like this, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know.
Casey White has had numerous run-ins with the law and was serving a 75-year sentence for kidnapping, burglary and attempted murder. Authorities say he will now never get out of jail again.
The day will come when Casey White will have to be brought back here for trial. And I can assure you, we have a crowding dilemma at our corrections facility. We have about 315 inmates with 256 beds. We're using every crook and cranny we can in that bed to house inmates. But he will be in a cell by himself if we have to put other inmates on the floor to make it happen. He will stay in handcuffs and shackles while he's in that cell. If he wants to sue me for violating his civil rights, so be it.
Moving on now, COVID vaccines for children under the age of 5 here in the US are still not easily available. But as the country lifts some of its final masking restrictions, many parents are upset that more than a year after the Food and Drug Administration authorized emergency use vaccines for adults, it's still hard to find them for younger children. Our next report gets you all the details.
Moderna is set to complete its data submission of a COVID vaccine for children under the age of 5 this month. The organization, Protect Their Future, held a rally at the Food and Drug Administration headquarters asking the agency to start an immediate review. Parents gathered in front of the FDA office with posters and signs urging the agency to prioritize young children and review data without delay.
We're raising visibility and remembering the fact that every single time that you minimize the number of deaths that have happened amongst children from COVID-19, well, it may be a very small percentage. Every single one of those families is grieving the loss of a child. And we want to make sure that in talking about going ahead and moving that data forward, that we're also remembering the fact that these are some of the motivators for why we're here.
Almost 500 stuffed animals were displayed at the rally to symbolize the number of children under 5 who have died of COVID-19. Now, as the number of new COVID cases continues to fall in parts of the country, and talk has returned of figuring out how to forge a new normal after the pandemic, some parents of young children and their pediatricians feel as though that population has been left behind. They think the FDA has not acted with enough urgency to make the vaccines available, leaving young children vulnerable to the virus and unable to return to ordinary life.
And now we're all starting to look down the summer towards school in the fall. And we know that with school schedules starting anywhere from the end of July to early September across the country, we are on a very limited window during which we can actually have a vaccine and fully vaccinated children before they start school in the fall. As a parent of a 3-year-old, I want to see my son go to school and feel protected with the same protections that others have from the vaccines.
Children with moderate to severe asthma are at greater risk of becoming severely ill from COVID. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, of the more than 848,000 people who have died in the United States from COVID, 727 have been under age 18, and less than 1.5% of child COVID cases have resulted in hospitalization. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Ferdinand Marcos Jr., popularly known as Bong Bong, clinched a stunning victory in the Philippines presidential election on Monday. The archipelago has witnessed its first majority win since the 1986 revolution toppled the 2-decade dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos Sr., father of yesterday's winner. An unofficial tally shows that Marcos has surpassed the 27.5 million votes he needed for a majority, setting the stage for a return to power of the controversial Marcos family.
Ferdinand Marcos Jr. clinched a stunning landslide victory in the Philippines presidential election on Monday, bringing the son of a former dictator back to lead the nation. An unofficial tally showed Marcos, popularly known as Bong Bong, with more than double the votes of his closest rival, setting the stage for a once unthinkable return to rule of the Marcos family 36 years after its retreat into exile during a people power uprising. Supporters in Manila cheered as news came in.
After we vote, we go here to support and wait for the result. And now we won 20 million plus votes for BBM!
Marcos has presented no real policy platform, campaigning on a simple but ambiguous message of unity. Marcos was criticized for skipping presidential debates and made few media appearances during his campaign, enabling him to limit scrutiny and control his message via a network of influencers and bloggers. Critics say the campaign sought to discredit historical accounts of cronyism, plunder, and brutality during the 2-decade Marcos Sr. dictatorship, about half of which was under martial law. The Marcos family denies siphoning off billions of dollars of state wealth during its time at the helm of what opponents say was one of Asia's most famous kleptocracies. That regime ended in 1986, before many of Marcos Jr.'s supporters were born. Some are convinced those past narratives were lies invented by his opponents. His presidency is expected to continue the policies of outgoing leader Rodrigo Duterte, whose ruthless, strongman approach proved popular, helping him to consolidate power.
Scores of inmates were killed during a prison riot in the Ecuadorian city of Santo Domingo. The riot came as a result of a clash between rival gangs inside the jail. This latest incident of prison violence has rattled Ecuador. According to the country's Interior Minister, Patricio Carrillo, around 108 prisoners are still on the run and another 112 have been recaptured. Authorities reported that the scuffle broke out after a gang leader was moved to Bella Vista prison following a court order. The Interior Ministry reported that 44 prisoners were killed in the incident, adding that most had been stabbed to death. Relatives waited outside the jail, anxiously waiting for news.
Pero hasta ahorita no podemos saber si está él vivo o está muerto. Nosotros queremos saber a él. Si está bien, bueno, ahora si está muerto o vivo, no. Eso queremos nosotros.
A police commander said that the prison unrest had been brought under control, adding that a security fence was put in place around the jail's perimeter. This riot is not the latest incident of violence in Ecuadorian prisons. The government attributes these incidents to gang conflicts over control of territory and drug trafficking routes. Ecuador, which borders the world's two largest producers of cocaine, Colombia and Peru, is often used as a jumping-off point to export drugs to the United States and Europe. The country seized a record 210 tons of drugs last year and has already seized another 82 tons this year. Last year, more than 300 prisoners died during riots in various prisons across the country. Overcrowding is another big problem. Ecuador's prisons are about 15% over their maximum capacity. The Taliban's assault on women's rights continues in Afghanistan. They are now targeting women's right to drive. Local accounts from Herat say women are being denied driving licenses there, but instead of a nationwide ban, the Taliban seems to be relying on local officials to carry out their regressive policies. Undaunted by this threat, some Afghan women are continuing to get behind the wheel.
Driving through Taliban country is dangerous. Fatal if you're a woman. Yet that is what Shaima Wafa is doing, confidently driving through the streets of Herat. Watchful eyes follow her car, some in disapproval, some in disbelief. What if the Taliban see her?
I personally told a Talib that it's more comfortable for me to travel in my car rather than sitting beside a taxi driver. And my family also happily allows me to travel in my own car.
Women drivers are rare but not unheard of in Afghanistan, especially here in Herat. This northwestern city is often considered liberal by Afghan standards. Shaima Wafa is hoping that it continues. For her, driving is all about self-reliance.
If we don't have a man or a driver home at midnight, I need to be able to take my family to a doctor in my car without waiting for my brother or husband to come home.
What does the Taliban make of this? Officially, they are silent. And that's how Taliban 2.0 works. No nationwide blanket decrees or bans. Instead, local officials are asked to implement regressive orders. On women drivers, it is no different.
I must say that these things regarding women that are publicized are all rumors. It's propaganda. No official letter has been received forbidding them from studying, working, driving or taking part in social activity.
Rumors, he says, but locals in Herat tell a different story. Taliban's local officials have issued diktats to driving schools and traffic authorities. The order is simple. Do not train women drivers. Do not issue licenses to them. Unlike their last stint in power, the Taliban are moving slowly, but their vision remains regressive. Women drivers say they are stopped at checkpoints.
I have not seen any official letter banning women from driving, but unfortunately licenses are not being issued to women. And at checkpoints, some Talibs might stop us because of their personal opinions.
2.0 or not, the Taliban's ideology remains unchanged. What is different is their modus operandi. No outright bans, no nationwide diktats. Instead, it's a slow march to disenfranchisement for Afghan women.
Now, stunning news from the world of art. Andy Warhol's iconic portrait of Marilyn Monroe sold at auction last night for $195 million. It's called Shot Sage Blue Marilyn, and it becomes the most expensive work by a US artist ever sold at auction. The 1964 silkscreen image shows Marilyn Monroe in a vibrant close-up, her hair yellow, her eyeshadow blue, and her lips red, all on a turquoise background. According to the auction house Christie's, it's also the most expensive 20th century artwork ever sold. Here's the story. Finally from us today, a Nepali Sherpa scaled Mount Everest for a record 26th time, beating his own previous record set last year. 52-year-old Kami Rita Sherpa scaled the 8,848-metre peak on Saturday along the traditional Southeast Ridge route, leading 10 other Sherpa climbers. We're going to leave you with a report about that astonishing achievement. I'll be back again tomorrow, same time, with another edition of WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching WION. World is One.
आज हामी फिसिङ टिम 12 जना यहाँ मेको 7 तारिक
This is right, Arab.